Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Oh, good morning, my bad.
Yes.
Welcome to the Ways and Means Committee. Today is Wednesday, January 24th. And before we begin our briefing, I would like everyone to welcome someone who you will see here on Wednesdays. On the other days, he's not as fortunate because he's on that horrible committee, ECM. But Blake Folden, Senator Folden's son, will be joining us, helping out. And I can say this because Senator Folden is my very good friend. He wanted to see some boss women, show Blake that women can run things. So that's why he's here. Okay.
He doesn't really even know who called.
With that being said, I would like to welcome Troy Lamel-Stovall, the CEO of TEDCO, to join us. And whenever you're ready, you can begin. And everyone, let's welcome Ms. Troy Lamel-Stovall.
Thank you. Getting the technology together here. So, Madam Chair, thank you for having us, all the delegates here. Thank you all. Then let me first of all thank you all for your support of TEDCO over the years. We've been around for 25 years, but more explicitly, last year. Last year we had a number of efforts come through this committee, not the least of which being our Equitech bill. Thank you for that. Thank you for your support of that. It's still a long way to get it where we want it to be, but you're going to hear some of what I'm talking about today. The efforts that we've used as we continue to build on what we call cultivate. And you hear me talk about cultivate. The Equitech bill is just one of the many tools that we think the state needs in order to really meet its economic development goals. You've got a large document there. I am not, Madam Chair, going to go through all pages of this document. I promise you. I'm going to use one of the pages here to really give you all. I know there are a number of new members here. And so my goal is to allow you to hear what we do at TEDCO and how it can help your constituents in your areas. Let me start, though, with some numbers about TEDCO. Let me start with the fact that TEDCO, from a budget point of view, is a $60 million budget. We have 40 individuals that are staffed at TEDCO. We are headquartered in Columbia, Maryland. Actually, we're moving to a new facility in Columbia here in downtown Columbia in the next few months. We're excited about that. We do all the early stage technology and life science investments on behalf of the state of Maryland. Said even more simply, we're the venture capital arm for the state of Maryland. We are doing direct investments in early stage technology and life science companies. I'll spend more time on that. We also have another part of us that also does grants that works on tech transfer as well as developing research. And you'll hear me talk more about that. In the traditional asset management or investment space, one of the terms that's used is called assets under management. We have $300 million of assets under management, or AUM. That number puts TEDCO as one of the largest investment management entities headed by someone of color in the United States. The other number that I'll also give you is in fiscal 23, and we actually will send to the committee, Madam Chair. We have a link in our website now that really we're talking more and more about the work that we're doing around what we call underserved markets. We talk about underserved markets, underserved communities, and underserved founders. What we mean by that, underserved community. When I go around and I see, say, empty warehouses sitting in Baltimore, I see the opportunity for an urban garden using aquaponics and hydroponics. When I talk about underserved markets, one of the things we talk about is one of the largest underserved markets that has technology and life sciences and packaged goods, that has very loyal customers, has no venture capital in it. It's called Black women's hair care. It's underserved. And underserved founders across the country last year in the fiscal 23, in the third quarter, 0.3% of all venture capital in the United States went to an entity started by someone of color or a woman. 0.3. At TEDCO, again, this link that we'll send you in fiscal 23, we had over 300 applications come in for all of our investment programs. Of that 300, more than half of them came from someone of color, women, or from our rural areas. More than half. We did about 60 different investments that we made. There was another 60 that got put into fiscal 24. So we'll get the results of that in fiscal 24. Of those 60% of those went to someone of color, a woman, or from our rural areas. So we are far over indexing towards where the national averages are. We thank you for your support of that, but we can do more, and we know we can do more. So with that, let me go into our presentation. So, I've spent some time on talking about what we are. This is, we need to update the slide because it's actually around 25 years that we celebrated our 25th year here recently. But what I want to point out on this page is the word empowerment, because what you're going to hear me talk about is how we take opportunities that are as early as in someone's head, or literally on the back of a napkin or sitting in a research lab, and how we move those ideas from that head, from that napkin, from that research lab into the marketplace. And I've done this venture capital. I've been a venture capitalist. I've done asset management, and I've had a chance to work in Silicon Valley doing this. And those individuals there told me two things that always stuck with me. First, they said, Troy, we've lost more than we won. We've lost more than we won. But when we win, we always hit a grand slam or a home run to make it for the singles, doubles, and triples that we lose on. The second thing, and it's an axiom all across all of venture capital, is you always invest in A quality people that have a B quality plan, and never the reverse. Never the reverse. Why? Because the whole point of this is the coachability of those individuals. Can they be coached? Because the idea probably isn't the idea that's going to really make them what they need to be. The idea is, are you willing to stick to it and have an idea, and can we coach you to where you need to be in order to get to where you got to be? So that's the whole point of the empowerment piece. I've been blessed to be able to work in a lot of different organizations over my career. And I will tell you, in working with those, the idea of values is critical. And I start all of our conversation when I'm talking about TEDCO with this. And many of you may say, why? Because I think it's important for you, who we are accountable to, which is our first core value, understanding that these aren't just words on a page. We literally are living these words. We're putting them within how we do our performance management at TEDCO. It's how we talk to one another. Even when people are telling me when I have not done something correctly, they'll use one of these 5 words to tell me how I have not done something in terms of respecting or integrity. So this is integral to what we do internally at TEDCO, but it's also how we talk to the ecosystem at large. We're talking about accountability, collaboration, integrity, respect, and stewardship. We have to do these things, and we hold ourselves accountable for these things. So I gave you some numbers already by TEDCO. This is from 2021. We're redoing this, and we know this economic impact is approaching almost $3 billion. One of the ways, because I'm an engineer math person by training, by academic training, and so when to round up to 3, which I think the number is going to be close to $3 billion, we've had about 180 employees over the course of 25 years at TEDCO. If you do the math on that, that's almost $15 million of impact per employee over the course of TEDCO. And I can promise you, Madam Chair, I'm not paying anybody $15 million a year. The other way to think about it is, over the course of those 25 years, we're talking about almost over $7 billion of impact per year. But the other way to think about this, we did a quick analysis of all the funds that the state has put into TEDCO over these 25 years. And the multiple on that, Madam Chair, is a 12x. And I can tell you, in the venture capital world, if you get a 12x return at the early stage that we're doing, you're best in class. And the last number I didn't tell you that's not on this page, back to the venture capital world. Venture capital world has a number of metrics that we use. You probably heard things like IRR and return on capital. Another one is called the total value of paid in. In other words, how much money did you get back based on what you put in? So that's called TVPI. And a TVPI, a very good TVPI in the venture space, is at a 1.718. TEDCO is at 1.415. So we're considered best in class, even though we have 2 limitations on us. One, we can only invest in the state of Maryland. That is our limitation. And we can only invest in certain types of companies, certain stages of companies. No other venture capital firm that we compete against has those limitations, and yet we're competing and having returns equal to or even greater than those who don't have the limitations that we do. So I actually want to spend most of my time, though, on this page, because if there's any page you want to, if you really want to understand TEDCO, this is the page that does it. There are really 3 parts to TEDCO. There's a part where we're talking about what we do around tech transfer. There's a part of how we're supporting the ecosystem. And the third part is the investment products that we have. So let me start with, and so you see that line there, that red dash line of, on my left, the federal labs and the corporate side. On that University of Federal Lab side, we have a number of efforts, 3 efforts specifically I'll talk about. One is called our Maryland Innovation Initiative that many of you may have heard of. That is our MII. That is our effort with the 5 research institutions here in Maryland. Those are Johns Hopkins, University of Maryland College Park, University of Maryland Baltimore, Baltimore County, and Morgan State University. We help in the facilitation of tech transfer, and you see a lot more details in the subsequent pages about our MII and the impact MII has had. It is a nationally recognized program where we get other states who are coming to look at us to see what we're doing to help facilitate this technology transfer, moving it from the research labs into the marketplace. The other effort that we have is called the Maryland Stem Cell Research Fund. Does exactly what it says. It's using our dollars in order to help facilitate both the research, postdoc research, and clinical trials using stem cell or reproductive medicines. Last year at our budget hearing here in this building, there was a little boy, he was about 8 years old. He was born in the bubble. He was born in the proverbial bubble because he couldn't. Because of research driven by stem cell and work at Johns Hopkins, that little boy was running around with his little bow tie on with a bunch of tears, and that helped get our budget passed. So we appreciate that. But they do some great work with stem cell research. But what they're focused on, and one is tied to economic, it's clearly tied to economic development. But one of the things we're starting to move towards, and you're going to hear me say this word a lot, is manufacturing. Where we are lagging here in the state, and it was a study that we did last year, the TEDCO that you helped through the Equitech Fund we led, it said we are lagging in manufacturing. One of the efforts in the stem cells is about a $20 million fund. They're committing about $5 million of that to help seed manufacturing around stem cell. We have to get at this. And that's an opportunity not just to create and extend our research, but frankly, jobs. If you look at the report that we did, we're missing out on job opportunities by not having these manufacturing jobs here in the state. The last thing that we do on this side of is our federal labs. All of you know we have more federal labs than anywhere else in the country. What we don't do is, frankly, is take the technology and get it out of those labs. Through the governor has just within our budget, and hopefully you guys will consider SBIR, the SBIR match. The governor's put $1.8 million into our budget to help us facilitate the SBIR match and the tech transfer with that. There are 20 plus other states that match. SBIR is the federal government's venture capital piece. So the federal government puts in equity dollars into these companies through an effort called SBIR and STTR, but it's non-dilutive. In other words, it doesn't take any equity from the company. This is basically a grant that the federal government is doing. Several other states match those funds. We do not do that yet here in Maryland, but the governor has put money in our budget to allow us to do that. The other thing I'll tell you on this side of this line is we also have an effort with an entity called the Henry Jackson Foundation. I had never heard of this until about 1.5 years ago. They're over in Bethesda. They get $500 million per year from the Defense Department. They sit on the world's largest supply of intellectual property focused on warrior health and warrior science. But they don't know how to turn it into companies. They turn to us to help them figure that out. This is a huge opportunity for us to really lead in that space with all the intellectual property and IP that's sitting there at the Henry Jackson Foundation and at our research institutions. As I move to the other side of the line, you get into our investment products and our support for the ecosystem. For the ecosystem, we have an entity called E3. That's entrepreneur and ecosystem empowerment. And they basically do 2 things. One is they focus on that entrepreneur. And with that entrepreneur, they're asking basically 2 questions. How do we accelerate $1 of revenue or $1 of recurring revenue? And the second question, how do we accelerate $1, first dollar of investment or the next dollar of investment? And why do I keep using the word accelerate? Because if we in Maryland can have a certain sector, certain percentage of our companies accelerating where it normally takes 3 to 4 to 5 years, and we can lessen that time, that obviously is great for the entrepreneur. But what it does for Maryland, it allows that capital that's sitting outside the state to ask what the heck is going on in Maryland and come to Maryland and start to invest in Maryland-based companies. But from a TEDCO perspective, what it does, because our economic model is built off of the value accretion. We put $1 in, we're trying to get a $3, $5, $6, $7, $10 back out, because that is our flywheel. That's how we actually, because we don't ask for money every year for some of our programs. We have to get the monies we get every year to invest are based on our returns. So that would help accelerate that for TEDCO. The second thing that E3 does is we help put together the ecosystem, whether it's incubators, accelerators, lawyers, whatever those entrepreneurs need, all those resources that are scattered throughout the state. That other part of E3 helps to bring those together. I mentioned to Delegate Roberts, we have an effort called UBII, the Urban Business Innovation Initiative. We also have the Rural Business Innovation Initiative. On the rural side, we divide the state into 5 regions. We put someone into each of those regions, and they focus on those entrepreneurs and the resources in those areas. But we recognize we weren't focused on our urban areas, particularly Baltimore City and Prince George's County. So we put an individual into those 2 jurisdictions to do that exact thing, to make sure we were stitching together those resources for the sake of those entrepreneurs. As I close, Madam Chair, let me talk about our investment products. So we have 3 investment pools. We have our social impact, our seed funds, and then our venture funds. On our social impact funds, and on top of all of that, we have what we call SSBCI, the State Small Business Credit Initiative. That's a $10 billion program from the federal government. Maryland got $200 million. Of that $200 million, TEDCO has $50 million. I'll talk about how we're using that. Part of that is we seeded the social impact funds. Within social impact, we have the Builder Fund, which you all are aware of, which is now, thank you for the support of that. It's at $7.5 million. With social impact, we realize there are a number of companies back to underserved communities and markets and founders that may have a great idea around technology or life sciences, but may not be attractive traditional venture capital. And so we want to provide those funds for them to still have that ability, that startup capital, but we recognize we may not get the same level of returns that we get from our traditional investments. But we provided those funds through social impact and Builder. And we're writing checks anywhere from $150,000 up to about $500,000. And seed funds, those are companies that have a concept. They may even have customers, but probably just have prototypes or beta customers going on. And we're investing anywhere from about $350,000 up to $1 million in our seed funds. And finally, in our venture funds, where those are funds that are traditional venture funds, Series A, B funds, we're investing anywhere from about $300,000 up to $2.5 to $3 million. And that's where we're expecting our significant returns out of those. What we've done with our SSBCI funds, we put additional funds into the venture and the seed. And then what we've also done, I mentioned to you that there's a lack of capital going to companies, 0.3%. There's also a lack of individuals who are people of color and women managing funds at the venture capital level, what are called general partners. So what we've done with we've done about $12 million of our SSBCI dollars. We're going to fund 3 to 4 funds that are led by someone of color or a woman. We've already announced the first one. It's a Black woman who's going to be investing, obviously, in Maryland, 100 KM, Shalonda Armstrong. We just announced her just a couple of weeks ago. We're putting $3 million into her fund called 100 KM. So I also want to quickly, as I close, we've got a couple of newer efforts that you guys have approved, that being Cyber Maryland. Thank you for that. I mentioned Equitech. It's right now it's still called animal testing, but it's the human relevant testing that we also have. Through the governor's efforts, we're going to be also, looks like if that all passes, we'll be focused on the Baltimore Tech Hub as well. We've got a number of dollars flowing through TechCo that will be in support of the Tech Hub efforts there in the Baltimore MSA. So I will stop there, Madam Chair, and obviously open myself up to any questions.
Thank you. We'll start with Delegate Patterson.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you very much once more for a very informative presentation. I just have 2 questions.
Yes,
one
ma'am.
has to do with community colleges. I know that you cited that there's a lag in manufacturing as well as incubators. These are the areas where community colleges have taken the forefront. So are there programs, specific programs that address your relationship and partnership with community colleges?
Yeah, thank you for that. Absolutely. And let me start with one that's not a direct TEDCO program, but we're on a significant number of us are on the board of, and that's the Maryland Innovation Grant. Those are funds, again, provided to us by the legislature that allow us to provide funding to institutions of higher learning for faculty positions that are focused on technology-based economic development. We just awarded some recent ones to some community colleges, and particularly a College of Southern Maryland received one. Yes, College of Mothering received one. And so we recognize the role that community colleges play in innovation in their rule in those areas. So that's one. The second one that we also have with the community colleges that we're focused on is through our Cyber Maryland efforts. We recognize that that's going to be a huge place. And so the Cyber Maryland efforts, we actually have the community college representative on our board of the Cyber Maryland. Cyber Maryland is an effort to look at how do we change the way in which we increase the number of individuals that can go into cyber related opportunities, but also think differently about how those things are being hired. And so we see that there's already great efforts happening in our community colleges, Delegate Patterson. And so we're trying to amplify those and find even more innovative ones to increase that pipeline, increase the diversity of that pipeline. The last one that I'll talk about is the one that we have in the queue, again, based off of the monies that the governor's put in, that's being called the Baltimore Innovation Initiative, modeled after our Maryland Innovation Initiative. That will be focused off of the schools in the Baltimore MSA that will include both the 4-year and the 2-year institutions. And so that will be an effort, again, depending on how it plays out through this budgeting process, Delegate Patterson, we will focus on the community colleges and the MSA to get them involved around innovation as well as entrepreneurship.
Thank you. And last, a quick question. As it relates to empowerment of women who are underserved or women of color, what is your relation? And this is a quick question. Do you have a relationship with any of the Pan-Atlantic groups? For example, some groups have as an initiative or factor empowerment, economic empowerment of women. Do you encourage those groups to reach out to you, or do you do any kind of partnership or collaboration with them?
Not direct collaboration, but we do have great relationship with the HBCUs. We had a great effort at Coppin State about 2 months ago. We had 300 women. It was a forum on Black women founders. And we had 7 women founders on the panel, and then we had 5 venture capitalists who had to respond to the challenges that they have. But no, we don't have, to answer the question directly, no, we don't have a direct relationship, but we do work a lot through the HBCUs to get to those relationships.
All right, I'm going to encourage the Pan-Atlantic group. Thank you.
I will do that. As a member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, I will make sure that I do that.
Certainly with Alpha Kappa Alpha. Sure. Thank you.
Delegate Hornberger and then Delegate Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation, Troy. In terms of, I want to focus in on the high-tech startups, be it software, be it R&D. Some of these companies have extremely short life cycles. They might be 2 months, 6 months. Some of the feedback that I've gotten about TEDCO is the rapid ability to deploy funds. So if all of the criteria that you've just described have been met, and we've got this fast upstart company, what's the timeline? What's the length of deployment for the funds once you all have reached consensus and getting it to the actual company?
No, I really appreciate this question. I really do. And don't take this as I'm asking, but we have a limited capacity. We are at record number of applications right now, record number of applications. Our investment team, we have 3 fund managers, plus 2 other folks there, and then the chief investment officer. So at a high level, and this doesn't, this is at a high level, this is the process with timing, okay? And we recognize exactly what you're saying. And before I answer your question directly, let me add another anecdote that your question alludes to the things that I say is that, and I hope no one takes this in the wrong way, but it's just a fact that Maryland is a very immature ecosystem, particularly at the early stages. We don't have enough capital at that early stage. And TEDCO, quite honestly, and I can say this as the CEO, plays an outsized role in that. And we just need more capital at that early stage. That said, so when someone submits an application, we commit to anywhere from an initial screening, and I'll explain that in a second, initial screening, anywhere from 45 to 60 days.
Okay.
Initial screening. That initial screening basically answers 2 questions. I'm oversimplifying over 2 questions. One, do they meet the eligibility requirements of being in Maryland and having 51% of their employees in the state of Maryland? And then the team prepares what's called a screening memo based off of that, which I approve to make sure that I don't see anything there that would cause. And then depending on where it fits in the queue, because, you know, we've always got, it could take anywhere from 3 to 6 months for us to do the due diligence. Some of that is on us, and some of that's on the company. Sometimes the companies aren't responsive to us in a timely manner with the data that we need, and sometimes it's us, right? So even after those 6 months of FMA, then we still may have, even if we approve it, there still could be another 2 months of negotiations in terms of the legal, because OAG is our legal representative. So I did a quick analysis, and this is not scientific. I'd say on average from putting it in to when a successful funding might happen, it could be anywhere from, on the short end, 3 to 4 months. On the tail, it could be 7 to 8 months. And yes, we know that is a challenge for some of these companies. I won't sit here and deny that.
So is there, as a follow-up question, is there anything that we can do as a committee to expedite that process? Or are there any rules or laws that are slowing that process down?
No, it's not. It's just a capacity issue, sir. If you know, in my old world of venture capital, we're I didn't say this number. TEDCO, and this is not a goal that we have. TEDCO is the number 3 most active venture capital firm on the East Coast and the number 21 in the country.
Okay.
That's an amazing statistic given the size that we are. And let me give you another, if I may, Madam Chair. We have 300 companies in our portfolio, 300. Again, we have a team of 5. When I look at the other big venture capital and private equities across the country that have 300 portfolio companies, they have staff of over 100.
Right.
And so I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm trying to just give you the facts as they are. And I recognize your question. I wish I could figure that out. And we're looking at, are there some analytical tools, some AI tools to help speed this up? We're absolutely looking at that because we recognize your question. And it is the question, quite honestly. I don't have an answer yet. Yes, would more money help us? Yes, it would. But I don't think that's the answer 100%.
Okay, thanks so much.
Delegate Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Troy, it's always a pleasure.
Damon.
My questions really revolve around Cyber Maryland. As you just mentioned AI, I think that this portfolio is going to grow and become more important. Can you just give us a sense of what the progress is of standing that up? Has the board met? Have they selected and structured chairmanships, et cetera, just where they are?
No, thank you for that. Mindy Lehman, our government affairs, and Alex Choi, who are here, who's also in the government affairs for us, really are leading the charge around that. We recently had our second meeting. We're about to have our second meeting. We're about to have our second meeting with the Cyber Maryland board. So there's 3 things. One is the board has stood up. I think we have 1 or 2 positions we still got to fill, but the board has stood up and we've met and we will be meeting. I think I just mentioned that the governor is recommending that the budget be reduced by about $250,000. So that'll put us at about a little over 400. We have not hired. We are in the process of trying to hire an executive director. If I'm going to be honest with you, I think given the not knowing what the funding is going to be, I think we're going to probably do some type of interim appointment of the executive director, as opposed to asking someone to come in full time to kind of stand by on that. And then I think what we're trying to figure out is how do we, just like with Equitech and Cultivate, how do we begin to put into place, Delegate Young, efforts to go after federal, philanthropic, and corporate dollars? It was never meant that the state was going to be the sole funder of this thing. So how do we begin figuring that out so that we can begin? The whole point of Cyber Maryland, as you recall, is to do pilots. How do we begin seeding some pilots that help us think differently about how do we train and how do we increase the throughput and how do we increase the diversity and how do we change the hiring pedagogy of this whole thing? So it very much like a startup. We're in that startup ideation stage, which is always a tough place to be.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Miller, then Delegate Henson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So thank you for the presentation and for bringing the information. My concerns mainly are around the Rural Business Innovation Initiative and the Proposal Lab. Can you kind of expound on what's going on in our more rural areas of Maryland, please?
No, thank you for that question. You guys got great questions today. So with the rural effort, again, we divide into 4 areas. We've got an individual in each of those areas. And very much like even with in some of those rural areas, we know we need another person they're just covering not enough space. But we can also say, and I didn't mention this, we also have the Rural Business Pre-Seed Fund. We put $25,000 into these, and we've had some very successful companies come out of our rural areas through those efforts. But again, it's just a lack of scale, Madam Delegate. And then on the SBR Proposal Lab, it is actually one of the best in the country. The individuals who go through that lab, particularly people of color and women, have a 3 to 4 times greater success rate of getting SBRs versus those that don't go through our SBR lab. So we're excited about the $500,000 that's being proposed to help us even scale that up even more. But let me close. Our rural areas are, I have visited every area multiple times. I go to those areas multiple times. There are some great opportunities happening, particularly around things like cyber ag, autonomous work, ag tech, that need to be elevated. And we're using our platform to elevate those efforts. We just did a very successful platform raising effort for the Matrix Lab down in St. Mary's County. We elevated their visibility. We're going to do the same thing with work that's happening on the Eastern Shore. And we've got some efforts in way around Western Maryland as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. Let us know how we can help.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the detailed presentation, and not just the presentation, but the supplemental materials that give us even more information. In my experience, I feel like TEDCO and Marbidco, all of our state investment arms, that the public's understanding of the resources that are there and available to them, I'm sure, and is not always where you would like for it to be. You mentioned the Black hair care industry, and that being a multi-billion-dollar industry. Nationally, we've seen where the big companies have really lost trust with some of the consumers, some of the lawsuits about what sort of chemicals were involved. You know, I think there's more of a desire for people to have local or smaller companies that they feel like they can develop that relationship with. We have a number of providers here in this state who might sell their products at craft fairs or expos or things like that. Is TEDCO positioned to help those companies grow? And if so, what would that look like?
Yeah, I think, again, great questions today. Thank you all. I think one of the things we struggle with, a couple of things in your question we struggle with, is around our marketing. We do a great job. Ms. Tammy Thomas, who many of you probably know, leads our marketing and development efforts. And she's got a great team, and we're all over the social media, but we need more. We know there are communities we're not reaching. As an example, we know we're not really reaching the Hispanic community effectively. We know that. I mean, our numbers show that, and we need to do a better job of that. And there's certain rural communities we know we need to reach better. People just don't understand. But even on the tech side, I think people don't understand that we are focused on, and our statute limits us, that we can only be investing in technology and life sciences companies. And it also limits us in terms of we cannot be in certain retail, certain banking, and certain things we cannot invest in. And so a lot of our time is spent, Madam Delegate, talking to companies about how to pivot. Many of them come to us with service-based entities or retail entities that we just can't invest in. And so our E3 unit that I spoke about earlier, to answer your question more directly, helps move them. As a very specific example, we had a young lady, a Black woman in Baltimore, who came to us with what was basically a consulting company. And we, through a lot of efforts and a lot of trial and error, and a lot of her getting upset with me initially, we moved her to a technology-based platform that we could invest in. And if I may close, probably the bad joke that I tell is that, if George and Weezy Jefferson come back and start a cleaning business, and they use technology to clean clothes better, faster, cheaper, or deliver them in some Uber-like fashion, the question we want to be able to ask, Madam Delegate, is, are George and Weezy tech entrepreneurs who just happen to be in the dry cleaning business? Or are they dry cleaning entrepreneurs using technology to fundamentally change the dry cleaning business? That's the conversations we need to be trying to have with folks, is how do we help them use technology to fundamentally change the businesses that they're in? And sometimes, quite honestly, back to my A people and B plan, that becomes a hard conversation because they're so wedded to their idea, they don't want to hear what they need to do to pivot. I hope that answered your question, ma'am.
It does. And thank you for taking the extra time to work with some of those companies and entrepreneurs who are right on the cusp, but need that extra push to be able to qualify.
Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Delegate Wu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Strover, thank you very much for presenting this, and welcome to Howard County as well. So one question for you. You said you have $60 million the budget every year, right? You have 40 employees. How much money actually you're investing
Yeah.
in the companies? How many companies you are investing?
Yeah, so that's a $60 million budget, but as I said, some of our money comes from our investment returns, right?
Mhm.
And so on any given year, again, it fluctuates. Any given year, we might be putting anywhere from 50 to 75 to $80 million out, but that's a function of the previous returns that we've had, based on previous return. So like last year, fiscal 23, we put in $75 million. We had investments.
So how many companies you are
Yeah,
investing?
that was the 60 companies that I mentioned, the 60 companies.
60 companies.
Mm-hmm.
So-
60. Mm-hmm.
Around each company, almost $1 million investment.
That's about right.
I see.
That's about right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Delegate Wells.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's good to see you, Mr. Stovall.
Always.
Rest of the TEDCO team. So you piqued my interest when you were mentioning aquaponic vertical farming in
Mhm.
Baltimore. Last year, I was able to get a bill passed that provided a grant program through Department of Ag to help enterprises, specifically focusing on agro enterprises,
Mhm.
right? So obviously, I'm very supportive of local farming and also of kind of community gardening, but specifically thinking about the growing of enterprises that provide food. So I'm curious, my colleague brought up Marbidco, and I know Marbidco has a role to play,
Mhm.
but I know, especially in some more urban dense areas, there is a lot of interest in transitioning to vertical farming and other farming tech. So I'm curious if you have any examples of, if you all have a strategy that you're looking at to upscale that, and if there's any examples that you could share about what might be taking place across the state where
Right.
where that's happening.
So back to the technology question, and this is always a hard part of the conversation with our entrepreneurs, because just using aquaponics isn't technology enough. It's just like just having a website isn't technology. It's how do you use it in a way that makes it unique, makes it produces a product, produce something we can invest in. We have to be able to invest in something. Not aquaponics is not something we can invest in. There has to be a unique way in which you're bringing and using that. And that sometimes becomes a very difficult conversation because they see it as technology, and I get that. But because of the way that, again, I'm gonna use the word thesis, but it's also our statute limits us to what we can invest in. So to answer your question directly, yes. We're working in, I mentioned this Urban Business Innovation District in Prince George's. We also have them in Baltimore City. And a lot of work that we're doing is finding ways to make sure those entrepreneurs particularly are looking at, we haven't invested yet, but we are working through some opportunities that could lead to some urban garden types of opportunities there in Baltimore City and actually across the state. So not just in Baltimore City, across the state. We do a lot of work with our friends on the Eastern Shore around some ag tech work as well, to how to productize that work. But the other space that I really would like, that your question makes me think about, that I really think the state could be the worldwide leader in, is cyber ag. And if I may, Madam Chair, I mean, that space is a space that we have all the fundamental elements here in the state. We clearly have cyber, we clearly have ag. You can have the Defense Department part of it. There's a piece for the autonomous piece with our friends. That is a piece, there's manufacturing involved. And as a friend of mine who knows the space way better than I do said, if terrorists should stop flying planes into buildings and poison the water supply, it's easier to do and would bring more terror. There is a space for Maryland to lead in this. We are convinced of that. And so to answer your question, we are very focused on that being a tentpole that Maryland should build itself around.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the committee? Delegate Roberts.
I can talk. Okay, thank you. Good morning. This is my first time asking a question.
Oh,
but
congratulations. I'm even honored, fellow Prince George, and I'm super
Wait a
honored.
minute, let me back up. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I mean, Madam Chair, Madam Chair, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm an entrepreneur myself, and I'm a huge, huge advocate for entrepreneurship, especially in the minority community. I was interested in finding out what do you offer, what training programs do you, or are you able to have or offer companies any outreach, training, education that may support businesses that are, you know, in these industries? And if they exist, how, you know, how, can you just talk a little bit about it?
Yeah. So again, congratulations on your first question. So two ways. One is the E3 unit that we have a number of roundtables that we have webinars, we have a thing that we call the Prelude Pitch. So we have a number of internal programs. But on top of that, we partner with the economic development entities, with universities across the state. We've partnered with I-Corps. So we have a range of ways in which, and we have our own, we actually have launched an effort with the 4 HBCUs around women entrepreneurs, getting them ready. So yes, we have a range of efforts. So people can go to the website that we either do it internally or we partner with our friends in the ecosystem.
This is very good information. So I'm really excited about you. So I'm going to be.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much for being here. Thank you.
Good seeing you. Delegate Wilkins, good seeing you as well.
Committee, we'll see you at 1 p.m.